no-till gardening, no-dig gardening. You've probably heard these terms and thought that they were the same thing, but they're not. Many gardeners use these terms interchangeably, but they really shouldn't. Hi, I'm Gardener Scott, a master gardener who discusses everything gardening so that you can become a better gardener. And today, I'll talk about no-dig gardening and no-till gardening. To be fair, no-till gardening and no-dig gardening have many similarities. They are both gardening methods focused on reducing a lot of the labor that we gardeners do. And they're both highly focused on soil and allowing nature to improve the soil. But would it surprise you if I were to say I do not practice no-dig gardening, but I do practice no-till gardening? When I discuss the no-dig method of gardening, I'm specifically referring to the method developed by Charles Dowding, a British gardener. He's the one that's popularized this method in many books like this one, Organic Gardening, the Natural No-Dig Way. And Charles Dowding's no-dig method is all about compost. It starts with the general assumption that we have to dig organic material into our soil to improve it. But Charles Dowding says no, not at all. What he does is place compost on top of the soil every year as an amendment. And then he allows earthworms and other soil life to do the digging for him. It's those soil organisms that will take that organic material that he's placed on top of the soil and then work it in. He plants his seeds, he puts plants in, he grows a garden like all of the rest of us. But he's got the compost as the upper layer, and that's the only thing that he does to improve the soil. No-till gardening tends to be much broader based. It's not just focusing on compost as the primary way to improve your soil. And there are many books on no-till gardening, like this one, No-Till Intensive Vegetable Culture by Brian O'Hara. In this book, compost is just one way to improve your soil. There are so many other ways that you can get nature to work for you as you improve your soil and grow in your garden. And you may be already practicing some of the methods. So Ruth Stout, for instance, which is using hay as a mulch and then growing in that, well, that's a no-till method, not a no-dig method. And back to Eden, same thing. It's wood chips as a mulch, and then you plant in that. Well, that's a no-till gardening method, not a no-dig method. And this bed right here that I've recently amended with a big variety of organic material and then mulched with straw, well, I think you guessed it. It's no-till, not no-dig. You may be thinking, what's the big deal? It's just semantics. It's no-dig, it's no-till. Both are ways where you just don't disrupt the soil and you're trying to improve it by using organic material. Well, the reason for this video and my entire channel is to try to make you a better gardener. And I think better gardeners have better knowledge. Well, this is one of those issues where there really is a difference between these two different philosophies. And as long as you understand the philosophies, you can better choose which one works best for you. Both no-dig and no-till seek to avoid damaging the soil. Because when we bring in a mechanical tiller, we rip the soil apart. The organic material, the soil organisms, especially any fungal growth, can be devastated when we pulverize this material. Well, the no-dig method seeks to eliminate that entirely because we are never disturbing the soil. Whereas no-till allows some disturbing. We can get in here, we can mix up some of the organic material that we're adding, but that's not necessarily a terrible thing. One of my viewers, Eric Christensen, compares it to mixing a drink. If you use a swizzle stick You can stir the ingredients in that drink. You're just mixing it up. That's different than putting all the ingredients into a blender, which pulverizes the drink ingredients. That's the way I like to look at it as well. I can add organics to the top of the soil. I can work them into the soil. I can do all of that without disrupting the entire bed. Sure, some of the organisms might be damaged. I might kill some earthworms along the way, but at least I have that choice to add organic material as I see necessary. Whereas no dig essentially takes the choice away from you. Compost or nothing. I said I practice no-till methods, not the no-dig method, and this is a good example. In this area of my garden, I have fruit trees, and I will be planting many more fruit-bearing plants in the years to come. Under Charles Dowding's no-dig method, I would cover this entire area with about 6 inches of compost to improve my terrible soil. Instead, I'm following a basic back to Eden gardening method where I cover this whole area with about 6 inches of wood chips to help improve the soil over time. This is a big difference. With Charles Dowding's method, you can put the compost in place and start planting right away. The assumption being that that compost will be rich enough for all of the plants you want to grow. Whereas in no-till gardening, there might be a time perspective. It's going to take a while, years, before this soil improves to the point that I can plant anything at any time. Knowing the difference between waiting and planting right now comes down to a big difference between these two different types of gardening. As I look at this bed at the end of the season and I think about the soil, I definitely want a lot of organic material to improve it. And another factor comes to mind. I would love to practice no dig. I'd love to cover this bed with inches of compost. The same with all the other beds in my garden. But I just can't make that much compost, which means I need to buy it. And it can become cost prohibitive to cover this bed with compost along with all the others. So in bigger gardens, the no dig can become difficult because you just can't make that much compost. What I can do is get leaves and grass for free. And I can take these plants, these bean plants that have died, and add them to the soil as well. There's a difference in time, again, because compost already has the bacteria, the microorganisms that have begun to break it down. So compost on top of the soil is ready to go pretty quickly. When I use raw ingredients, I'm starting from scratch. I have to wait for those soil organisms to begin to break down the material. That's why I do most of my amending in the fall. So I can add organic material to this bed and have months for it to break down before I get to spring and think about planting. And I don't have to work it into the soil. I can take all of that organic material and place it on top and still allow all of those organisms to work for me and break it down to improve the soil. That process of taking rough, raw organic material and just placing it on top of the soil, allowing it to break down, is called sheet composting. Or as you might have seen in a recent video of mine, lasagna gardening. This is my lasagna garden bed. And I've added a variety of materials, and even more now that I'm cleaning up the garden in the fall. I'm giving it the opportunity to break down and become rich soil so that in the spring I can plant in this bed and it'll be packed with nutrients. Lasagna gardening is a no-till gardening method. This is my hugelkultur mound. I dug a deep trench, I filled it with wood and branches, other organic material, built it up. Now it's covered with wood chip mulch. You guessed it, this is a form of no-till gardening. Both no-dig and no-till are interested in the final result of the soil. A good soil that requires minimal effort to keep it good. And you can see it in perennial beds like this asparagus. I can't get in and amend this soil every year. Once it's in place, it's kind of stuck and the plants have to grow in it. To get the nutrients, I have to add more organic material to the top. And so this could be ideal for no-dig methods, where I just add compost on a yearly basis. Well, I don't like being that restricted. If I use no-till methods, I can cover this bed with all different types of mulch and allow this mulch to add the nutrients that the bed needs. Charles Dowding rarely uses green manure or cover crops to improve the soil. He'll use a plant like mustard because it dies back in the winter. But as far as growing plants in your bed that you can incorporate to add some really beneficial nutrients, he stays away from that completely. Well, I've got some winter rye growing in this bed because it's a cover crop. It's a green manure. I'm going to work it into the soil to improve it for the spring. This is another difference between the two methods. No-till gardening allows you the opportunity to put plants in, to work them into the soil. No-dig, a lot of limitations. There's a similar difference when it comes to mulching as well. Charles Dowding uses compost as mulch. Well, I need to use other types of mulch. In an area like England that gets regular rainfall, you can just use mulch and it will stay consistently moist. Well, in my region, where I get very little rain, if I use nothing but compost on top, it's very likely to dry out and dry out pretty quickly, which means I need to water more often. I can use compost, but by applying a mulch on top of it, like this straw, I can reduce some of those water requirements. So for me, I'd love to use compost solely as a mulch, and I've done that before. It just isn't the best thing that I can put on top of my soil. It may seem like I'm seeking to disparage the no-dig gardening method, and that's not it at all. It can be quite effective. In one of the experiments that Charles Dowding did, he had two different beds. One where he just placed the organic material, the compost, on top, and the other where he followed no-till methods and worked it into the soil. Well, the results of this experiment showed a 6% increase in the harvest of the no-dig bed versus the no-till bed. That 6% may be important to you. And if you have the compost, especially in a smaller garden, no-dig may be perfect for you. As I've attempted to show through the course of this video, however, I don't like to be that restricted. I can't apply compost to every single bed, so I have to look at these other methods. And if you're using these other methods with success, you're probably thinking the same thing. It doesn't have to be an either or. I will be doing some no-dig gardening beds. I also have a lot of no-till gardening beds because I have that latitude to try these different methods. The ultimate decision is up to you. And both of these are very important considerations when you're deciding how to garden because it all focuses on the soil. And the soil really is key. If you think about the soil, if you improve your soil, regardless of what method you use, you will have better plants and you will have more success. And to learn more about soil, I encourage you watch one of these videos next. I'm Gardener Scott. Enjoy gardening.